Former Tennessee head coach Jeremy Pruitt had a 6-year show cause. We'll come back to that. But Tennessee lost 28 scholarships over 5 years. They've already self-imposed 16. They only have 12 left over the next 3 years, which they can do 4 scholarship reductions per year. Multiple assistants got show causes. I'm not going to go down all of those. One got a 5-year show cause. One got a 10-year show cause. If I'm not mistaken, the one that got a 10-year show cause was Brian Niedermeyer, who was found guilty of going to and picking up Darnell Washington with $175,000 worth of cash in a duffel bag and picked him up in a plane. He got a 10-year show cause per this report. Tennessee will lose 36 official visits throughout the recruiting process. The Vols will have to select 10 regular season games during which they cannot host official visits, including 4 SEC games. I do think that is the biggest of all the of everything going on. I think that is the most significant. When you can't host recruits of the next couple of years, like how can you, bro? They can't host recruits during Tennessee, Alabama, potentially. Wow. I think that is a very big deal. So half of their SEC games, which also means, Joe, all of their home games. That basically what they're saying is all of their home games, they can have official visitors at their home games. Now, that's nuts. Now, Pruitt, I'll get to this one last. So they have an $8 million fine, 3% that they had to pay back through their what they gained in football. They have some wins that they have to vacate. But here's the thing. Jeremy Pruitt, who was the big name in all this, got a 6-year show cause. He'll be suspended for the entire first year if he is hired anywhere else. So, meaning next week, Jeremy Pruitt could be hired by the University of Alabama and be suspended for a year, and they could be the DC the following year because he served his 1-year suspension. So even though he's got a 6-year show cause, if he's hired anywhere, he can still be a DC somewhere. So it's not really a 6-year show cause. It's really a 1-year show cause if he gets hired somewhere. This is in right. I'm reading this off of the violation sheet. So let me repeat that again. Jeremy Pruitt was given a 6-year show cause window. That's the key word, window. He will be suspended for the entire first year at a new job if and when he is hired. An example, if Pruitt was hired at Alabama as a defensive coordinator, but was immediately or just hired anywhere, he would be suspended for a whole first year. So meaning they would have to hire him today, okay, and he can't be on campus until the 1-year suspension is done with. Mm-hmm. I mean,
are you saying that he was let off easy? Is that what you're trying to get at here?
I think that's pretty much getting off easy.
Look,
Joe,
it seems like you're going to disagree with me. It seems like a lot of people in the chat are disagreeing with me. I think all this is bullshit. I think this is all ridiculous. They got in trouble for something that we know before NIL was legalized that was happening at every single SEC institution.
No, don't single out the SEC now. Don't single out the SEC.
Sorry, across the country, everywhere. But the SEC is one of the few conferences where it's happening at every single big program. There is enough evidence that it goes back very, very far in the history of the SEC that players have been paid, and sometimes some schools get caught with it. Tennessee was the latest one to get popped. NIL is legalized, and they're still receiving punishment for something that now happens on a daily basis in front of our faces. Why was there any punishment? Give them the fine and move on. I don't understand why there needs to be anything further than this. This isn't like the Hugh Freeze, Rick Pitino situation where there's hookers involved or anything inappropriate like that.
Right.
They were paying kids, giving them money for down payments on cars, giving parents money for medical procedures. They're just giving them thousands of dollars. That's literally happening right now in front of our faces. That's what doesn't make any sense to me, why there was even any punishment. And I know people are going to sit here and disagree with me because there's a long-standing history of serious punishments being handed down for anything related to recruiting happening. But for what we now have and the changes, there should be nothing. Give them the fine and move on.
I'm going to disagree with you. NIL and boosters and people paying for NIL money or collectives is completely different than a coach getting on a plane and going to see Darnell Washington and giving him $100,000 plus to come to their school. That's money underneath the table. That's completely
But that was before we could hand them money out publicly.
But you brought NIL into the conversation, which I'm saying is, even with NIL being legalized, it doesn't matter. What they did was still an offense. Placing $10,000 per McDonald's bag is still illegal through the NCAA. You still cannot do that.
But if there was NIL at the time, they wouldn't have had to even do that.
You're not paying him for his name, image, and likeness.
But let's be frank with ourselves here. The name, image, and likeness payments are just a wrapping paper on top of what it actually is just paying the kid to come to the university. We're pretending here.
I think that people are misunderstanding what NIL collectives are doing. Let me give you an example.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that boosters in schools aren't trying to cover their ass? Let me tell you what's actually happening. And these NIL collectives, very quickly, because I don't want to go down this rabbit hole.
Yes.
They are making sure that you're on campus for more than 3 months before you start getting paid. Okay, so it's not as if it's basically because kids are having to wait, let's call it what it is, almost a whole football year to get paid. Okay. Coaches are still having to go out there and pay these kids so that they can get them on campus in recruiting. That's right. What they're really, Joe, they're pay. If you think that Nick Saban is not out there with his assistants right now handing out cash, you are dumb. Now, that's my point, though, is that the illegal actions happen all over the SEC, and it's almost as if the NCAA is handing down a half-assed punishment, but still this is still a punishment. This is significantly impacting recruiting. They're doing it because they don't want to have to acknowledge that it's happening elsewhere. They know damn well that it's happening elsewhere. They're just singling out Tennessee because Jeremy Pruitt was a dumbass and did it way too in front of everybody's face that they got caught. They got popped for it. They are obligated now to punish him. What's interesting is if Darnell Washington was getting paid and got paid that much from Tennessee, how much did he get paid from Georgia?
That's an even bigger question. And right now, they're never going to dive into that. They're never going to reveal any of that because that is such a negative. Tells you
why Darnell Washington stayed for as long as he did, because he wasn't money hungry. He didn't have to be.
Right. I always find it interesting, though, Blake. The teams that get in trouble for this are always the teams that are doing bad. So Jeremy Pruitt was fired after not really producing at Tennessee, and then also on top of all this, they use this as an excuse.
In fairness, now he was doing it in front of an NCAA. What do you call that? Somebody who works for the NCAA was there because Tennessee basketball was playing like Kentucky.
Yeah.
And they were just going there to be an official for it, like to, show representation. The dude walks into McDonald's. He walks in with a buddy of his and sees Pruitt doing it.
That's really stupid. I didn't know that part. That's pretty stupid.
It's a small school, but my man's out in the public putting in envelopes in the McDonald's bags now. Like I get what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Like Alabama's never been popped for it. Actually,
they always pop schools when they're down bad, and then they're very obviously doing it and they get caught. But like theoretically, if Nick Saban this happened, I don't think Nick Saban would ever get in trouble for this, and I don't think Kirby would ever get in trouble for this, because you can't have your best institutions be the ones getting in trouble, because then it is a negative reflection of just college football as a whole. and then to have to vacate wins potentially, like it would cause too much of a commotion and would make everything look terrible. It very rarely happens with these successful programs.
I'm going to kick this. This is a great question. I'm going to kick this to you first. Who's more to blame, Tennessee or Pruitt? Because I do think that this is a very interesting conversation. I do think it's a very interesting conversation, and Junkyard Dog was the one who sent the comment. Thanks, Junkyard. I think it's an interesting conversation. Why is Tennessee more punished than Pruitt?
I mean, that's always a great question, and that's why I sit here and I yell and say that this is bullshit. I think that Pruitt is the most to blame, especially for what you just brought up, that I didn't know that aspect where he idiotically, blatantly did it in front of an official the way that he did. It's kind of like the Alabama coach who got in trouble trying to bet at the sports book, who just could not have made it any more obvious.
Well, that was a little different. He texted through like the WhatsApp. Yeah. And then the guy that he texted that Luke Holman was not going to be pitching literally went to the Cincinnati sportsbook and said, I have inside info. Here's $100,000.
But
people are not smart, Joe. They're not smart.
So I think it's Pruitt's fault for getting caught. It's not his fault for him doing it. I'm not going to sit here and say it's his fault for doing it because, again, a lot of the successful programs in the SEC are doing it, but are not getting caught. I don't blame Tennessee at all. And that's why I don't think it's fair to sit here and get upset and say that they should have received the bowl ban, because it's not fair to multiple years after the fact
Correct.
To then punish another group of kids, a new coaching staff, for something that they didn't do. This isn't like the Jerry Sandusky situation where that is, you kind of have to hand down something as significant as that. But the fact that NIL is now legal and the fact that you'd be punishing a random group of kids, it's fair that there is no bowl ban here.
All right. Here's been my my take always. I do think both needs to be punished, because a school cannot go scot-free when something like this happens, right?
Yeah.
However, they do receive, let's call it what it is. Now, some of the assistant coaches that actually did it, the minions that were actually doing all this, they got popped more than anybody. Like Niedermeyer got popped. I mean, a lot of the assistant coaches, it really is damaging to them. They're the ones that got the significant part of this. The problem that I have, the only problem that I have is this. Is on the surface, it looks good. This is classic NCAA. On the surface, Jeremy Pruitt's punishment looks significant, but the fine print doesn't fit the crime.
No.
Meaning, Joe, if he's hired by Alabama today, he will be suspended for 1 year and then can start coaching again. While over the last, during a 5-year span, Tennessee not only is having to pay a fine, but Josh Heupel is 28 scholarships reduced than what he should be. So basically, this is hitting Tennessee more in a longer period of time than it is actually hitting the person that committed the crime, right? I don't think that that's fair. I don't think that it's fair that Jeremy Pruitt can be hired by Alabama today and be suspended for a year while Tennessee continues with a new administration. Philip Formel's not there anymore. They got a new AD. They got a new head coach. They got new assistants. They got new players. By the way, one of the guys that you're hitting the violation on him with never even stood campus on there. So the thing is, you paid the kid for what? It's not so the recruiting violation comes in if he comes and plays for you. He never stood foot on campus at Tennessee and played for you. He played against you. He played against them this year when they could have beaten them and won a national title, or gone on to win a national title. Who knows what would have happened if they would have beat Georgia? My only point is it feels like Pruitt got off a little bit soft, Saban. And Tennessee seems to get the brunt of this, even if it is a little light, like the $8 million. Let's call it what it is. Everybody here knows it's the truth. That ain't nothing to Tennessee.
No. No.
The scholarships do come a part of something when you need depth to win in the SEC. And I just feel personally that Tennessee as an institution, which, by the way, Joe, look at Tennessee was good this year, right, in football. Look how great it is for that state to be good in football and what they give her. Joe, they had so much pent up frustration about losing to one of their biggest rivals in Alabama. They ripped a goalpost out of the ground and walked it miles down to a river and threw it in a river. They were so happy. When Lane Kiffin came back, they were throwing which I don't condone this. This is stupid, but it shows the passion. They were throwing golf balls at Lane Kiffin. Why do they have to get hit more than Jeremy Pruitt? That would be my only argument in all of this.
I also add to your conversation here that Tennessee's getting hit with this the worse than Jeremy Pruitt is. Like, that's the other thing too, is that, like, if we're going to punish somebody, it should be Jeremy Pruitt. But on top of all of it, Tennessee has been self-imposing, self-reporting. They have been cooperating with this as much as they could have done. I forget exactly what their self-imposed inflictions are.
So here's their self-imposed inflictions if you want them. Do you want them?
Yeah. Go ahead.
$8 million fine, 28 scholarships, 3% of next year's football revenue.
That's what they put on themselves before the punishment was announced.
Oh, no, they put on 16 scholarships is pretty much all they did.
Yeah, they reduced scholarships. So
and they reduced visits that players could take. So recruiting visits, they did that too.
I would argue if they cooperated this quickly and this aggressively, there should not have been any recruiting or scholarship.
I agree.
Like that's the part that bugs me the most, is then, like, I'm not going to keep circling it back to this, but again, the fact that NIL is now a legal thing, and that's part of what they're getting knocked for, is just the general process of paying a player, which is now publicly accepted. That to me is BS. But on top of that, you go out of your way to be cooperative. You go out of your way to be respectful of the process. You don't decide to just sit back and say, like, all right, give us your best. They imposed their own punishment that is comparative to what the NCAA would have dropped on them had they had waited. And the fact that they are then still punished aggressively and hurt in the most important aspect of college football, which is recruiting, is nonsense. It is, again, the continued proof. How many times on this show do we need more and more proof that the NCAA does not know how to operate effectively and handle its own affairs? They are never going to get anything right. And I know that we can sit here and scream about the removal of the NCAA. It's probably never going to happen, but this is just continued added proof that they don't know how to handle any of these situations. Put it on Pruitt, not on the University of Tennessee. It makes no sense to me.